And I'm going to give you co-host Banu so you can show your slides. All right, we got all
Okay.
the lists out of the way. So welcome everyone. You are spending your Saturday morning in Hawaii and maybe afternoon if you're in other parts of the country. And this is the Honolulu Nonprofit User Group. And today we are very happy to have a wonderful guest with us, Bhanu Tanaka. And backstory is I got to know Banu when I was in the Hiapo program, that is the program that is hosted by Purple Maya, which is a nonprofit. And they have been helping people in Hawaii learn Salesforce, and they put you through a 3-week prep program and a 12-week rest of the program to get you certified and then start to get a foothold in the ecosystem. And I let Banu talk a little bit more about that, but that's how I got to know Banu. He was my mentor. And Banu has been in the nonprofit space for a really long time. And so we're really happy to have him in our user group to tell us a little bit about what's going on now with this whole nonprofit cloud thing that's just
Mhm.
Salesforce just incubated. So, Banu, let's start out with you telling us a little bit of your backstory. How did you get started in the ecosystem? And then you can start to launch in and tell us all about this new nonprofit cloud
Yeah,
program being launched.
perfect. Yeah, thank you, Ruby. And I actually have a slide for that, so I'll just start rolling through
Cool.
and then we can get sorted. Before I start though, how many folks are like work for nonprofits, or you could probably just use I guess the reaction hand thing. I'm just curious, like in the virtual room here, how many folks are working with nonprofits or like looking to implement Salesforce as a nonprofit? I see Dodie. Okay. Victor, yeah, we mentioned that. Mike also, okay. And how many of you already have Salesforce? Um, yeah, how many of you already have Salesforce? Okay. All right. So we got folks who are new. Okay. Great, great. All right. Well, let me jump in. That helps me kind of understand how to shape this talk, because obviously we don't have a ton of time, but I want to make sure that we cover the things that are important for you. And at any given point, just jump in, ask questions. You could probably put them in chat. This is a user group, right? To me,
Yes.
it's interesting in the work that I do. Like, I get to meet a lot of like CTO type people, and I was just talking to a guy at a nonprofit who's like struggling because he has a custom application, right? He built his own thing, and can't remember what the technology was. And he's like, I have no one to talk to. And I was like, well, if you pick Salesforce, and I didn't realize that in this moment, you have this kind of stuff, right? Salesforce nurtures ecosystem. Salesforce supports these user groups. And these are the places that you can come and like talk about what you're doing and like get information and all of that. So this is a really cool thing. And I want to make sure this is interactive. And this is not like I don't know, sometimes the Salesforce product managers just talk to you. I don't really want that to be this. I want to have a conversation. I want to hear what your struggles are, and I want to be able to incorporate into what we're talking about. So,
Uh, and Banu, I just wanted to
yeah,
let you know we have till 11:15, so don't feel
yeah,
like you're lost.
okay, yeah. I want to make sure too we just have time to like talk, right? I mean, when I used to go to user groups in person, which maybe have we ever done this one in person, Ruby?
No, I have not.
We could, we have Purple Maya, so we have a place if we want to do it in person. So anyway, part of the cool thing was that we used to be able to talk with each other and like just hang out and hear what other people are doing. So I'd love to do that at the end if that's possible. So anyway, um, Ruby teed up this point, and it's like, where am I coming from? So, let me go back one slide, because I wanted to call it that I do work at two organizations. So as Ruby mentioned, I work at Purple Maya Foundation, which I see Kimmy, who's part of our program, Yi Yang, and Ruby. We're a nonprofit here in Hawaii. We're focused primarily on educating Native Hawaiians in technology. Started 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, focusing more on kids. And then in the last 3 years, we developed a workforce development program for adults, teaching folks Salesforce. So we've been able to graduate, I think, more than 40 individuals who have attained their administration certificate. And we currently operate a consultancy where we do real work. So part of our model is that once you graduate, you can train with us for 9 months. And that training is working in a consultancy where we do real work and we're like training and mentoring you as you work. I'm also a managing partner in a small consultancy called Terranox. Okay, so where am I coming from? I've been consulting for 25 plus years, starting with using like Microsoft Access for like shipping companies here in Hawaii. I worked at the Bank of Hawaii, built stuff. That was a very long time ago. Then moved into e-commerce, did some of the original e-com sites for like Guess Jeans and Disney back in the day. Then I shifted to PHP and I was the CTO for 3 startups kind of in the mid 2000s. Then I found Salesforce in 2012 as a customer first. So I was working at a nonprofit. We were about $20 million a year nonprofit in 13 states. And we were doing political advocacy work. And that was the first time I implemented Salesforce. So my perspective really comes from customer first, right? I was a customer before I was a consultant using the platform. So my perspective is always, okay, how do customers use it, right? Where's the value? I've built 3 consulting or practices at a company called Nudesic that got bought by IBM recently. Of course, started Purple Maya's Salesforce practice and also Terranox. So the things inside of Salesforce that I focused on is I've been a project manager. I got a PMP cert in 2002. I'm very familiar with Agile. Who knows DevOps? Do you guys know the word DevOps? Anyone? Thumbs up, DevOps? It's kind of this weird term that's been going around the last few years. Is another thing that I focus on is for like our enterprise customers. How do you move configuration between environments? I kind of love that part of our ecosystem. I've been focusing there. Obviously, Sales and Service Cloud, Nonprofit Success Pack, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I also do coding, so Apex, So I try to keep a pretty wide view, although this is like, Salesforce has grown so large in the last 10 years that, this is just tip of the iceberg. And then as Ruby mentioned, we've also been doing a lot of mentorship. So I started at an organization called Database Sherpa back in 2016. Ruby actually works with Trish Perkins, who is related to these folks. Database Sherpa was one of the first small consultancies that what we did was we didn't do it for you, we taught you how to do it. And as a developer, it was hard for me to transition. I used to say I had to sit on my hands because I couldn't do it for them. And I had to sit there and tell them how to do it and say, okay, click on the gear in the upper right corner and wait for them to move their mouse. I mean, it was a good learning experience because when you mentor and you teach people, you have to be very patient and you have to learn that you can't do it for them. So I always reference Database Sherpa because that's where I learned how to really just be patient and like care about people and, just really work with them to try and get them to learn this cool thing that we do called Salesforce. So, so some of you are from nonprofits and are considering Salesforce or at least nonprofit cloud. I wanted to bring the journey to beginning, right? Because we're going to talk about like implementation and the differences of the 2 clouds now. So at the start, these are some of the common things that I hear about why you're implementing Salesforce. My board is just telling me that I need to do this because they went to Dreamforce. I want to grow my fundraising capacity. I want to measure program effectiveness. These are, to me, reasons. These are things that nonprofit cloud really answer, right? So if these are the reasons that you are implementing Salesforce, then good news, Salesforce is going to fit you well. There are some corner cases that Ruby and I were just talking about how vast the nonprofit world is, right? You have museums, you have political advocacy organizations, you have climate change, companies. So the needs can be different, but these are some of the more general things, especially program effectiveness. And it's not an easy thing to solve, right? Because everyone's programs look different. So I wanted to call out, like, these are the things that you may be asked to look for a CRM or look for Salesforce for, or things that you're experiencing. For those of you looking for Salesforce, does any of these align with what your needs are, or put in chat if it doesn't, like what your need is for Salesforce? I'm just curious. or we can chime in too. Feel free to just speak out.
Well, I know a lot of the nonprofits that I'm working with because I'm in a consulting space. So I get to work with a lot, so several different nonprofits. And the biggest thing that I see is either they are having to migrate their data from one system to another, and then they,
Hmm.
of course, that's one use case. The other one is that they organically grew on their spreadsheets, and now with the requests from funders for more robust data, they're really having a tough time trying to squeeze that stuff out of their spreadsheets, and they realize that they need to have a central repository for all their data, and that's why they're
Yep.
looking around.
Yep. Yep. Anyone else? Yeah, it's interesting that you call out that data migration and also grant reporting or funding reporting, because what we're going to see is that Salesforce has specifically focused on this area first. And I think a lot of us in the nonprofit space are kind of scratching our heads. We're like, well, what about fundraising? But it seems like Salesforce is recognizing that the reporting side of things and program effectiveness is maybe where a lot of nonprofits are struggling. They may already have donation platforms, right? There's so many different platforms out there that they've kind of ignored. They're not ignoring that area, but it's coming in later. So that's really good, interesting feedback. So when you're thinking about planning, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on like how do you get into a project, because today's focus is really on nonprofit cloud itself. But the planning, I think, goes in three big steps, right? First, you want to get what I call big picture guidance. Like, is it Salesforce or not? Why am I even, what is a CRM? Why do I care? So user groups like this are great. You can contact Salesforce, really that's easy, right? Sign up for a trial and you'll have people calling you in about 10 minutes. So Salesforce will contact you, not very hard to get their attention. Associations like Hano, I know we did some work with Hano back in the past. I don't know them personally, but I know that they're a great organization, at least in Hawaii, in terms of bringing nonprofits together. And then ask your peer group, talk to your friends in the industry, other executive directors that you may interact with. I think that's probably the most helpful way to figure out what fits best inside of your specific nonprofit mission. Then next you might want to find a partner, especially if you're not, if you're new at it, you don't have an internal IT team. Remember that partners are mission specific a lot of times, right? So if you're a museum, you might want to find a partner that works with museums because your needs are a little different. There are, I think, generally two types of partners. You have systems integrators, which are a little more organized, like Ruby's working with a few of them right now. And then you have independents like Ruby. She's an independent also. Like myself, we run two companies that are systems integrators. I think the difference is, a little bit on cost. A lot of the SIs are more expensive because you're getting their methodology, you're getting project managers, you probably are getting, executives or at least delivery leads with a lot of experience. Independents, you tend to hire a single person who has a lot of experience. They can tend to be a little more cost effective. But I think it's harder because they're single people and they tend to be single tracked, right? So you might have to wait a few months to get their attention. But really good independents, like a person I'm going to show in a moment on a slide, like they're great, right? They have so much experience and they have really wide ranges of skills. The trick in finding a good one though is the trick, right? You got to ask around, and I always recommend that people don't just go off of Craigslist and find a person in Florida that they've never met and hire them for $35 an hour. Unless you really know what you're doing, right? Unless you've already done this before and you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I can hire someone and just tell them what to do. And then I think the biggest thing that we always recommend is get yourself educated. There are so many free resources. These resources are all free, cost you nothing, right? Trailhead, a huge amount of training. In fact, they have the nonprofit cloud modules out there. Salesforce Plus, has anyone, thumbs up if anyone has spent time on Salesforce Plus? Anyone? I'm not expecting any thumbs up. Um, oh, Okay, Kimmy, good job, Kimmy. Been to Salesforce Plus. It's actually not bad. I think we all laughed when it was launched last year because we were like, what are you guys doing? What they've been doing is they put all their new content there and they don't put it on YouTube anymore. So, when you go to YouTube now, you get old stuff from Salesforce and then a lot of like, community content, which is great. But now if you want the official stuff like World Tour in New York, um, last year's Dreamforce, you have to go to Salesforce Plus. But again, it's free. So, you know, it's yeah. And I have some links at the end too, so I can show you those. Trial org, I have a link to the nonprofit cloud trial org. So when you're ready to go, just go get a trial org, get in there, and just play with it. It's so different than nonprofit success pack. But it's pretty cool. And then of course YouTube. But as I mentioned, I think some of the content on YouTube is disappearing. So if you go to YouTube and look for nonprofit cloud, you're going to get a lot of MPSP stuff. So there are two products right now. This is what I think Ruby alluded to. So in the ecosystem, and I'll go through the histories of both. And I decided to start with the new one first. So I'm going to start with the new one called Nonprofit Cloud. The other one, the old version, is called MPSP, or Nonprofit Success Pack. So it's going to be very confusing for the next few years while we're both supporting, both products. So nonprofit cloud is very similar to MPSP. And this is, I actually got this slide from Salesforce. These are the features that are coming out in nonprofit cloud. And the reason that, another thing is it was just launched. So as a partner, we've known about this since February, and we've been getting information about it. I think they made the trial version ready in March. It's like February, March. It was right around TDX. And then this was, I think, the first public announcement. And granted, it was not buried in World Tour, but it was like one of the segments in World Tour. It's a 35-minute presentation. They do a good job of just covering, some of the highlights, and I'll be covering some of those highlights too today. So the features, as I mentioned, in Nonprofit Cloud that's available today are mostly focused around program management. So it's called program, and let's see, what is the app called? Program and Case Management. So this is actually the trial org. The app that they have currently released is called Program and Case Management. It is fully native, right? So the difference is that MPSP is a managed package. There was a team of 100 developers that built MPSP and maintained it, and it was a managed package in which you had to install, and it was separate than core Salesforce. When you think about core Salesforce, like opportunity object, that's core. If you have an object like MPSP affiliation, that is a custom object that's built by another organization, not part of core. So Salesforce decided that it made more sense, and I agree, this makes tons of sense, to bring nonprofit into core, like financial services cloud, like health services cloud, like all their other industry clouds. Nonprofit is now considered the same, which is pretty cool because we now get to take advantage of a lot of this industry stuff that was available to all the other cloud users and not available to us because we are on MPSP. So that's part of this big debate, right? That's going on in the ecosystem, like MPSP or nonprofit cloud, and then what's going to be the timing of how we do these things. So what's included today: program management, case management, accounting subledger. So that's very close to our GAU functionality. You can see how it aligns, right? PMM, project management, program management module is just like program management here. We have case management in MPSP, just like case management here. We have GAUs in MPSP, accounting subledger. So you can see how basically they're taking MPSP functionality and they're rolling it into core. And when you see it in action, you're like, oh yeah, that seems very familiar. So for those of us that have done MPSP, it's going to be a pretty easy shift. And it's actually, in my experience, kind of delightful because you get some new stuff that you get to play with. So here is the roadmap in a little more detail about what's in program delivery case management. So the idea about program delivery, again, just like PMM, right? We're ability for session tracking, ability to add bulk, add participants into things, do attendance, units delivery, That's PMM basically. So they just re-implemented that different data model. And it's also shared, it's like kind of immersed more into the core system than PMM was when it kind of just sat on the side. Case management is really, kind of like Service Cloud, but it's designed for service type organizations, right? If you're doing housing, if you're doing counseling, they give you things that are pre-built that help with processes like intake, analysis, providing service and support, and it also ties right into to the delivery model, right? So when you do a counseling session, for instance, it just tallies it in delivery to give you that level of reporting that Ruby was talking about that's needed. And then the thing that they're very excited about is what's called outcome management. And from what I can tell, outcome management is automations tied to program delivery or the reporting of. So I think there's some features that are already there. There's this thing called, let me go back on a slide because I can't remember the product name, business rules engine. And that kind of looks like outcome management, where it's a system where it says, if these, these things happen in data, go do something else. Has anyone used engagement plans in MPSP? It's a feature of MPSP that automates. So for instance, you could say, if on an opportunity record, we're 5 days from closing date, then send them an email or something. You could build a flow for that, right? You could build a workflow rule, although we're not supposed to do those anymore. You could build a process builder for that. Or you can use this thing called engagement plans, which is kind of pre-built, and you can set these rules up. Engagement plans was in MPSP, custom built again, and then it looks like inside of core, inside of industry cloud, which is what they call it, you have these things called, you have a product called business rules engine. And just to, kind of reemphasize that, if I go into here, so this is again the trial of nonprofit cloud, I have this thing called business rules engine, which for those of us that work in MPSP, you're like, I've never seen this before. So there's like a lot of new stuff that, there's also this thing called omni-channel. I'll talk about that in a moment. So anyway, higher level, that's what's in the new nonprofit cloud. And timing, again, is fundraising is not available till the end of the year. Here's another thing that's coming. So grant making, some of us might be using outbound funds or using the old version of grant making. They're redoing it, and it will be available in July. It will be for an additional cost, additional fee. It has its own SKU. So on top of your sales and service cloud licensing, this will cost more. And then Omni Studio. So when I talked to Salesforce, I was talking to the AEs this week to prepare for this. And the thing that they often said was the coolest thing you're going to get is Omni Studio. Anyone thumbs up if you know Omni Studio, heard of Omni Studio? Okay. So if you've done, young, of course. So if you've done screen flows or flows, right? Omni Studio is like that plus. You can do a ton more than current flows. And Omni Studio, Omni Script, Data Raptor, they have all these side products that they acquired a few years back. But this is what Industry Cloud is built on. A lot of the customizations are built on this thing called Omni Studio. And so as a implementer, you're going to have to learn it. It's a little different than Flow. And I've spent just maybe an hour with this, so I don't really know it in detail. But from what I've seen so far is that it really is Flow plus, right? It does a lot more. Yi-Yang, do you have any like direct experience or anything that you'd want to add on, positive or negative, about Omni Studio?
I have never really implemented it. I just played with it myself, like going exploring and stuff. So
what did you find in it? Like, what was your experience with it?
well, my experience with it, I can't really say because I was just like just fooling around, making trying to learn things and trying to see what's out there.
Yeah. I found it to be really, really slow. Like Like it literally took 5 minutes. The first time I clicked on it, it like took forever to come up, and it's a little slow. I mean, it's basically, from what I understand, it like builds Lightning Web Components for you. Like you declaratively design these things, and then it like spits out an LWC. So, I don't know. We need to learn a little more about what Omni Studio is, but it seems like it's a very cool declarative tooling that allows us to do, specific screens, specific data actions. And what I've seen in it is that it actually can call out to other systems and do integrations for you in a declarative way, which I think is cool, because as a developer, a lot of times we're working with our admin teams, right? Admins will be doing something in ScreenFlow, but then we need something really specific, like call out to another system to get data. We have to write code for that currently. It looks like Omni Studio would allow us that in a simplistic way to achieve that integration. All right. So that's Nonprofit Cloud. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Nonprofit Success Pack. So this is the former version, right? So all of us who currently use Salesforce in a nonprofit way have MPSP. We're using MPSP. This is what we've been trained on for the last 10 years. A little weird side note is that for those of us that have been around for a while, this has happened to us in Salesforce nonprofit world. There was a product that came out in about 2015 that Salesforce was pushing onto their nonprofits that ended up being kind of a flop. And so what happened 2 years later was Salesforce came back and said, oops, we made a mistake. We recommended bad software. And then those of us in the ecosystem now had a lot of work converting customers from this system to another one. So I wanted to share for those who are kind of new that in this community, in the nonprofit world at Salesforce, there is a rift. There's a lot of things happening, right? There's the layoffs that occurred. So a lot of the AEs have left and shifted. There's also those who have been around for a long time, got laid off from the nonprofit team at Salesforce. So some of the, I mean, if you look around at who's at Salesforce in the nonprofit world, it looks very different to us that have been around for very long. So some of the folks that we're used to, aren't around anymore. And some of those folks are here. So kind of the backstory on MPSP, it was really a ragtag bunch of people started in 2011 who, in those days, Salesforce was a B2B platform. It didn't work for nonprofits. And so what these folks decided to do, Kevin Brommer right there in the middle there, who's pretty much the father of all this, they started building it. Salesforce.org was formed, the foundation was formed, and they started to build MPSP and roll it out to us. So as a customer, the first thing I used in Salesforce was MPSP, and it was actually called Nonprofit Starter Pack back in the day. And so it was the thing you installed as a nonprofit into Salesforce to get it working. So fast forward, I think this photo is in 2018. The community has obviously grown. There are what are called community sprints. So before COVID, 3 times a year, Salesforce would bring together whoever wanted to come. There was a waiting list, obviously, because they couldn't afford everyone. But as long as you paid for your travel, it was free to attend the conference. The conference was 2 days. And in this conference, we would do work to build MPSP. MPSP is open source. You can go to GitHub and you can see it, you can download it. In this photo, there's some folks, there's Ashima, I think. And so these are like folks who, like I mentioned, been around for years in the ecosystem and are very passionate about building the product. So a little more, shaped by the community. I feel like, here's Karen Sabog for some of you guys who know some of our Hawaii folks. So this is at the community sprint in San Francisco. They actually held one after Dreamforce or TDX. Sorry, this was during TDX or Dreamforce. Sorry, I can't remember. One of those in the past year. And Karen was presenting. This guy's named Mark Baseman. He actually is a trainer in Omni Studio. So maybe we can get him to come talk to us about Omni Studio someday, Ruby. I know him from back when I worked on the East Coast. I wanted to share this because this is the heart. This is how the community feels to me, at least. So we have this crazy guy named Sprinty. Yeah, Sprinty. He's a T-Rex. And Michael Kolodner, a friend of mine, actually is Sprinty. So I ran into him, I think at Dreamforce. So like, these are just cool people. Katie McFadden's over here. She was just in Hawaii recently. She's a good friend. You know, we're all just kind of friends. And this is actually at the Sprint. We were working on PMM. So Katie was sharing her experiences about implementing PMM, and we had a bunch of customers with us, and we were just talking about data models and stuff. So, you know, 3 times a year for 2 days, you can get together with all your other nonprofit friends and actually do work, talk about your experiences, solve problems. These sprints shaped MPSP, which shaped Nonprofit Cloud. So I think it's really important to just recognize that, you know, there are thousands of donated hours, right? None of these folks are getting paid to be in this room. We all just paid our own travel. And, you know, I've been to Boston Sprint, Baltimore Sprint, not LA, well, LA in general, Portland and Seattle. And I don't know how many cities Katie and this guy Ryan, that Ruby and I were talking about earlier, have been to doing these sprints, right? So again, community driven, it's open sourced. You go to GitHub, this is MPSP. If you want to know why MPSP has a problem and you know how to read code, you can go in here and you can also commit, like you can become a contributor. I don't know actually if Salesforce is letting you anymore, but you could in the past. And then they also have what's called the commons. So on top of MPSP, you know, there's added functionality like PMM, program management module. So here's what's called the commons, where you have all these other projects like outbound funds. So additional functionality on top of things. EDA, if you're in the education space, that gave you a common data model for education or higher ed. Volunteers for Salesforce, another package that's used a ton. So the commons is where the community has been maintaining additional functionality that's used by nonprofits. So what's in MPSP for those of you that may not have used it or experienced with it? And these concepts are obviously carried into and grandfathered into Nonprofit Cloud. So the idea of households, right? When I mentioned that at the beginning, Salesforce being B2B, right? You got this account object that you're like, why do I care about accounts? I'm a nonprofit. I care about people and individuals and constituents and households. So MPSP invented, I will say, I don't know if anyone is original Salesforce, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that MPSP invented the concept of householding on the platform, which eventually became, you know, multiple accounts and then person accounts. So in core now we have what's called person accounts, which is really like individual accounts in MPSP. Person accounts came out like 2016. If any of you are thinking of turning it on, think really hard about it, because while you can turn it off, it leaves a bunch of fields in or you can't get rid of the fields that it creates. So if you decide to turn on person accounts, do it in a sandbox first. I mean, it's a good general rule, but I've had folks like turn it on and they said, but Salesforce said you can turn it off. It's like, yeah, you can, but it leaves all these weird PC fields in your org. So a little bit of warning. But MPSP has householding. It has the ability to like link, you know, a person to multiple organizations. That's called affiliations. I forgot to put relationships, because there's the ability to relate people together. Nonprofit Cloud, the new version, has all of that. That's all built into industry. It's called a little different. And the weird thing is they actually reuse it in things like Financial Services Cloud and Government Cloud. So what's cool is that we get to reuse functionality that's being used in the other clouds. Like if you think about a bank, if you think about a government service, they want households also, right? Just like nonprofits. So it's called the parties. They're called parties in Industry Cloud, but it's the same functionality as householding. Then in MPSP, we have donations. I think the things that are very specific to nonprofits in donations in MPSP are the things we deal with: moves management, you know, weird funding models like donor advised funds, soft credits. MPSP has built all those things over the years. I mean, I worked in MPSP before we even had soft credits, before we had batch data entry, before we had GAUs. So these have been things that the community has built over the last 10 years and will be in the future fundraising module in Nonprofit Cloud. come fall. And in MPSP, we have pretty robust case management. Again, this is where I think the nonprofits, led the way in defining how case management should operate in this space. And this has been re-implemented in Nonprofit Cloud. And then finally, PMM. I mean, this list is huge, right? So these are like the highlights that I feel are appropriate for this discussion and match with Nonprofit Cloud, the new product. There's things like volunteers. There's things like EDA. There's many other modules that, outbound funds and other ones. So there's a lot of other modules, but these I think are the core ones. So what's in, what's out, kind of a general summary slide, and then we could just walk through, then let's just jump in the org. We can play for a few minutes. So what's in, or what's not in Nonprofit Cloud? Volunteers for Salesforce didn't make the cut. They're not going to convert it till maybe next year. So if you're using Volunteers for Salesforce right now, you don't have a solution with Nonprofit Cloud. Fundraising is planned for October 2023. Looks pretty awesome. I'll talk about that in a moment. This is a big one. Currently, it's not compatible with MPSP. So what they're saying is that if you want to upgrade to Nonprofit Cloud, there is no upgrade. You have to get a new org, and you're going to have to migrate from MPSP to Nonprofit Cloud. Earlier, I mentioned that this is the second time this has happened to us in the last 10 years, because the last time Salesforce had recommended this other product, I won't name it, it was the same situation. Salesforce gave these customers another org for a year and said, for free, here's another org, move your old org to the new org so that you get rid of this old software and you're now on MPSP. So now the message is, take your existing MPSP, we're going to give you a new org, and then migrate MPSP over to Nonprofit Cloud. So question, how easy? It's going to depend, right? It depends on how complex your current implementation is. It's going to depend on what resources you have. They haven't, I mean, obviously ask your Salesforce AE, right? Now we're wading into territory that's so new. Exactly, NGOC, yes. Yeah, 2 to 3, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. This is the third time because we did have to upgrade, but I don't think going from version 2 to 3 was like a new org. I think you could do it in place, but it was different. But I kind of remember that. But NGOC was the thing I was talking about, which was, it was a completely different product. It didn't work. Then they gave customers free orgs for a year and they hired SIs to convert. I mean, as a scale, I worked at a pretty large museum. It took us about a year to migrate all their data. Granted, they had a few million opportunities. So they had millions of records. And so it took us about a year to get them from their NGOC system over to MPSP. Yeah, going from NGO, it was, and what's interesting, someone, I think, someone asked about tooling. What Salesforce did say at the World Tour event was this rule that it's incompatible. They're still working on it. They're still trying to figure out how not compatible it is. But right off the bat, you need person accounts. Person accounts breaks MPSP. So, maybe they're going to rework MPSP so that it's compatible with Nonprofit Cloud. That would be a logical approach to like rewrite parts of it so that it works. And then we can, bring these in. And I don't know what the answer is. No one knows at this point. But the message is that if you are on MPSP, you cannot just jump to Nonprofit Cloud. Person accounts from household. Sure. Yeah. I'll just put a note. Certification. I was curious last night. I went out to Trailhead and I was wondering what the Nonprofit Cloud Consultant certification. It still looks like it's MPSP, so they haven't updated any of the curriculum or anything. So it does not appear that there's a new Nonprofit Cloud Consultant. It's still MPSP. So what's in it? The free P10. So you get, our customers are still going to get 10 free licenses. Customers get to choose now between Do you want to stay on MPSP when you're a new customer, or do you want to go with nonprofit cloud? The warning, as SIs, we warn customers that nonprofit cloud is more expensive than MPSP. So when you get out of your 10 free, nonprofit cloud costs more than MPSP currently. So that's a bit of warning for customers that, and Salesforce AE should explain this, but it's also important to get the word out that the new nonprofit cloud currently is priced higher than MPSP. What's really, to me, really interesting is that nonprofit cloud puts you on a standard data model with all your other industry clouds. So like I have a large nonprofit we're working with that really could use financial services cloud because they're a community lender. So if you think about, you have nonprofits, again, all different sizes, all different shapes. If you have a nonprofit that's a community lender, why wouldn't you consider financial services cloud that gets sold to banks because banks write loans? Same functionality. Now we can do that, right? Now that nonprofits are considered like all other industry clouds, we can go to an AE and say, hey, let's evaluate, financial services cloud for this nonprofit, and it should work together. Currently, though, if you're on MPSP, you can't do it. So if you're on MPSP and you want one of the other clouds, no go, can't start because of this compatibility issue. We talked about Omni Studio. I'm pretty excited about that. There's this idea of a common data model for integration options. This was mentioned at the end of the World Tour presentation that I thought was really fascinating. So Salesforce is pushing MuleSoft pretty hard right now, MuleSoft being their integration platform option. And they threw in at the very end of the talk the fact that they are working with government agencies to basically say, hey, if you're providing services and receiving funding from us, we want your data in this format. And it's a standard format from Salesforce. So the hope, the goal, I guess, the promise is that if you're on a common data model in Salesforce and you're doing government work, in the future, you might just be able to connect your org to the government and it will just automatically work. You don't have to custom build reports. You don't have to custom build your data model. You don't, have to hire a consultant to build this integration to the state reporting agency. Where they were leading, and granted, this was like one sentence out of it, was that they're working with government agencies, because we know Salesforce is working heavily in government cloud, to standardize some of these implementations. Yeah, Microsoft has been working on this for a while, exactly. So they're kind of playing catch up to what Microsoft has been doing for a bit. This is a Salesforce talk, so I didn't want to talk about Microsoft. Joking. So, and then the thing that I was excited about for fundraising is what they were talking about. They're splitting up the opportunity object. So for those of us that have done fundraising in Salesforce and MPSP, having just one big opportunity object has been kind of clunky. And so what they said was they're splitting up the data model. They're, kind of separating out the front end solicitation and then commitment and then actual funding. So I think, and I haven't seen the data model. I'm pretty sure even if I had, we wouldn't be able to talk about it yet publicly. But they did mention this in World Tour, so I felt like it was appropriate to mention here. So resources, we'll post a slide deck so you can have these links, but this is the World Tour talk. Great 35 minutes. I'd recommend everyone watch that if you're interested in nonprofit cloud. You can get a trial org here. There is an intro video for MPSP on YouTube that I found that was pretty cool. And then there's a whole like how-to series for MPSP. So remember back when I talked about the sprints, one of the groups that has existed for many years is the video team of MPSP. And the video team produces these short 2 to 4 minute how-to videos. So if you ever are interested in any feature of MPSP, those videos are there. And if you want to request one, you can reach out to me and I can get it over to Bill, who runs that video team, if you have any requests. So that's kind of it for this part. We have some time. We can go look in the org. You guys can point me around. We can see what the demo looks like. I think Ruby also wanted to talk about person account and households. Any other topics that we can cover?
Yeah, Bhanu. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll wait. Somebody say
I
something?
was just wondering, yeah, hi, it's Dodie. I was wondering on the opportunity split, you mentioned three things. Are they talking about three separate objects, one for cultivation, one for commitment,
So
and one for funding?
I would imagine for funding, I heard I heard the solicitation and commitment in the World Tour talk. I didn't hear funding, but to me, you would put funding somewhere in there too. So I don't know. It's not clear.
Okay.
That part
Okay.
is unclear. And are you a partner, a formal partner?
I'm an independent consultant.
Okay. Have you registered as a partner though?
No.
Okay. It's free now. You might want to, because you get access to Partner Central and all this stuff is there, and you get access to the data models earlier. So
Okay.
might be worth just doing, because it's free, and I don't even know how long it takes to wait. But at Partner Central, you can get previews of, like I mentioned, I think they were releasing stuff to partners in February on all this stuff to kind of get us ready. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely do that. Any other questions, points? I think someone asked about training, like, or if you're going to getting certified. I don't, there's so many nonprofits that are on MPSP. MPSP is not going to go away anytime soon. So I think if you're really wanting to get in and do work, the work in the next year will still involve MPSP, at least the next year. I mean, granted, new implementations are going to be on Nonprofit Cloud. But it's still worth getting certified and studying and learning MPSP, in my opinion. Dodie, you do work in the ecosystem. What's your view on MPSP, nonprofit cloud, and what are you seeing out there?
I'm also telling people that if they've been studying NPSP, they should go ahead with the certification during 2023. Maybe things will change in 2024, but right now that seems to be where we are.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any customers start any nonprofit cloud implementations?
No.
No. Yeah, I'm looking for. We have candidates in the pipeline. We're like, these look good. We also have one that we might be able to start the conversion on. I think it would make sense. We're like kind of halfway into MPSP already. But yeah, definitely looking for one that will fit. And when we first heard about the fact that there was no fundraising, we were all really worried. But then now, I guess as we are out there are a lot of nonprofits that are okay without the fundraising component. Which is yeah, I was kind of surprised too. I was like, huh. And what's interesting is Salesforce has zero, they got rid of Elevate. Elevate was their donation kind of fund, or AR, right? The ability to take payments. So they have zero solutioning right now for online donation forms. So it was really interesting. They're recommending like Classy to integrate with Salesforce. So, kind of heads up, if most of our nonprofits that are in the fundraising space probably have some kind of mass donation need. Salesforce is promising that use case is going to be a part of October 23's release of fundraising. So it'd be interesting to see if they do provide a solution there, but currently there's no on-platform online donation capability, which is kind of a drag.
Hey, Bhanu, in regards to fundraising, because I've seen this in a lot of orgs, or the few that I've worked on, and even though NPSP has the whole fundraising donations piece pretty robust, they're still using other platforms like Classy or Springboard or some of these others. And it seemed kind of like, well, I don't know. It seems like the fundraising piece, because all the data flows from those third-party integrators into Salesforce, but I don't think that Salesforce would be robust enough to allow the nonprofits to do the kinds of stuff that these other platforms do. But I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that.
You mean like online donations and
yeah,
stuff
like
like
creating
that?
the pages, you've got the peer-to-peer, all the payment processor integrations. I mean, all the stuff that they come with a solution package. Everything is right there for you.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I can't wait till they decide to cobble together their tools, right? If you think about what Salesforce owns and operates, we have Experience Cloud for web, mobile, that's there, and people get that for free, right? So when you get your P10 licenses, you get Experience Cloud in a guest user way. So for those of you who don't know, Experience Cloud is a like a web front end on top of your Salesforce, and all customers get 500,000 free visits a month. Granted, it's guest users, so it's not authenticated. So the difference being that it's like public users. So you could theoretically build or customize a donation page, or at least a campaign landing page, to have people sign up on Experience Cloud for free. You just need to, do screen flows or hire someone that can operate it. So they have that web component. They also have Pardot in terms of lead acquisition, right? So if you think of advocacy organizations, they do a lot of just blasting of, campaign stuff. Pardot is a great tool for that. So you could implement Pardot and get a lot of your engagement and lead activity stuff. And then you got plain old Marketing Cloud. So for emails and normal other types of engagements. So they do have a lot of what like a Classy would give you. It's just fragmented and frankly expensive, right? Marketing Cloud and Pardot, they're not cheap, right? And nonprofits, we struggle with the fact that a lot of times we're resource constrained. I was at a small nonprofit on a board, and we wanted to do Salesforce, but we couldn't afford it. And what I mean by afford is just your P10 is free seats, but you got to customize it, right? So I was watching another presentation, and she called it build versus buy, which I think is super true, right? You can go get a platform like Tila or Fundraise, and it's done, right? You've just bought all your functionality. The P10s are kind of like you inherit a child or a pet. At least you have to nurture it and care for it. And especially, I think the new one, like, it seems a lot more raw, maybe because it's all core and it looks different. But it definitely doesn't feel like MPSP. So this is like inside of the new training training org. I highly recommend. It's pretty cool. Like, it comes pre-built with data. So this is it. Like, I basically turned this one on last night, and you can kind of poke around. So this is like PMM, right? We see enrollments by program. So this is their version of PMM. We can do very similar things in PMM currently. And then you can see a little bit about case management. We can like jump into one of these cases, and they have a thing about interactions. So, rather than just putting them in notes, like a lot of times we do, or building another custom object called interaction or assessment, they've kind of done that for us. We have care plans. This is the integration into PMM, so program. We have participants who are people. You have referrals. I mean, literally the stuff that we have rebuilt over and over and over is built into Nonprofit Cloud here. Here's your interaction summaries. These are standard things, right? Activities. These were what we're used to, case comment, case history. So, these are some of the new objects that are used in the new product. Let's take a look at a person. Let's see, there's no participant. Oh, it's interesting. That was a household.
How easy do you find it to navigate around? And like, if you were, I've spun up a trial org myself, and I was like, if I were giving this to a client, like, would you customize it a lot? What would you change?
Yeah. Well, I think Salesforce has its own usability. It has its own way of doing things. And I think as a consultant, it's very valuable for you to just adopt the way Salesforce does things, because then it's consistent. So the things that we often add are custom fields. So attributes and things that does not exist in the standard data model. Things like maybe you're interested in the last house that they owned or something. Those concepts aren't there, so you tend to add those fields. The other things you tend to do are creating business processes, so like approvals or say validations against a record. So maybe the record doesn't have enough data in the moment, so you're not going to let the user save it, so that you maintain data integrity. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of supportive things on top of what we see here. Things like global search, things like app launcher, things like tabs. These concepts I feel like are all part of the usability of Salesforce. So when we're teaching customers, it's always the same. You know, it's like, oh, you're looking for someone, go to Einstein search at the very top. Oh, you're going to change what you're doing. You're you know, shifting from processing gifts to now going to cases, change your app because you're now changing your focus. So to me, those are consistent usability items that you would want to take from client to client. And then the things that you want to change are more around fields and how the whole app flows. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, somewhat.
Why don't you ask more? Because I wasn't sure about the question itself. So yeah, tell me more.
Well, I guess I just think that like the whole process of like setting up the household seems pretty different. And so it could be, I worry that it could be difficult for a client to learn. So maybe I'm getting ahead of you though. So maybe you should kind of like demo.
Well, no, I think, let's even see where, I don't even know where households are in Nonprofit Cloud. I'm also in console mode, which I really personally dislike console, but I get confused. So what you're saying is that customers, in your experience, customers struggle with the fact that these concepts are a little different from what they're used to?
No, I don't know. I guess maybe could you walk us through like how you set up a household and the party relationship and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we can, let's just walk through. So,
Yeah, and Bhanu, so the thing that I'm kind of curious about is this whole person account versus the household model that we're so used to in NPSP. What the differences are?
With the person account with the household. Okay, so yeah, let's take a look. So let's say this is person 1. So we're creating a person account. And so it looks like, right off the bat, person accounts have like a little different icon, and they have lookups between each other. So unlike accounts where account was on top of a contact, person accounts allow you to go both directions. And so it kind of blends the concept of the account and contact object together. But let's go see what it looks like. So our account name ended up being person 1. And we have no, unlike B2B Salesforce, we currently don't have any contact. But what we can do is we can operate on this person account just like a contact. So let's just call this support enrollment. So we have this account. Let's see, person. You see how it like looks exactly the same. So it created a contact and the person. Oh, that's interesting. This is program creation.
Do they have a data model, like the data model diagram yet for the nonprofit cloud? Is that
They do?
somewhere?
They do, yeah. I can. I'll find out if we can publish that. I'm pretty sure because this is publicly available. Oh, select either. Oh, you want either an account or a contact. So we just enrolled our person account into an enrollment or into some kind of support. It's interesting.
It looks like you enrolled the account person.
Yeah, it made me choose one or the other, but it wasn't super clear. I like had to fumble through it because it asked me for an account and a contact, and I did both, and it said, "Oh, pick one." So it looks like you could choose either one, which, you know, I don't know how that actually materializes. But if we go back to the account now, you can see that the account is linkable to these things. Data model wise, you know, if you go to the back end, what is the tool called? You can view all your objects.
Schema builder.
Yeah, thank you. So in setup, there's this thing called schema builder, if you don't know about it, and you can drag in all your objects. Whoa. By default, it selected all of them. You can see.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Holy.
Okay, that's just too much. But we can look at account. Let's just look at the usuals.
Contact.
Account, contact, and then there's this thing called party. I'm
Party.
curious. We were working on this at TDX. We were trying to figure out like how the party model and all this stuff interacts with each other. Party's so far away. There's no immediate lookup, so I guess it's party consent, party relationship, and role relationship. Okay, that's where relationship group now is related to account, but we still don't have the, oops, sorry. We still don't have the lookup for how does a contact get linked into all this? Ugh, not very good at this tool because I never use it. So an account and contact, that makes sense. Party relationship group goes to account.
What is the party? What are they trying to do with this whole party
Well,
concept?
the party is the household, as I understand it.
Oh,
Parties are households, and that's how you're going to group people together.
oh, okay.
And you can see that there's a relationship now. So the difference is, I think in the household, you're just a member of the household, but the
Yeah.
party model allows you to designate within this group or this party, this person has this role. So it's kind of a blend of affiliation with
Really?
household.
Hmm. So is it the thing where like so-and-so is the father of so-and-so kind of thing? Like how you have an MPSP, those relations?
I mean, yeah, that would be contacted person to person, but similar. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if there's reciprocals in the party model because you're normally, you know, in relationship, you need the reciprocals, right? Father, son.
Mhm.
I don't know if you need that in party, but yeah. So party is, let's go find party. Maybe we can build a party.
I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge is we are so NPSP brainwashed and trained that we're gonna have to like
Learn a new thing.
back to the wind and relearn the whole data model and the whole new way of thinking of how these people are all related to one another, and then the
Kind of, but
for it.
kind of, but not, you know, because if you really, if you sit down and look at it, these are still the concepts. These concepts don't change. The names change, to your point. The names change, but the concepts are the same. Nothing really differs in terms of concepts. So like, as you know, if we're experienced in helping our customers implement MPSP, we will be able to use that experience. The difference is going to be, you know, in the actual implementation. But I do believe that for folks who have had a track record of doing things like I think Dodie did, and you know, it's going to be okay. I think for folks, it's going to be fine. And for you too, Ruby, it's going to be fine. It's just going to be different names, but you already understand these concepts, and that's the hard part. And you can translate these concepts to customer, kind of like what Craig, I think, was getting to, is that the words and the concepts might be a little different, but as a consultant, our job a lot of times is to translate and hold their hand through it, right? That's our value, is helping them leverage what's available and teach them and make them feel comfortable. A lot of the value of a cloud platform isn't customizing the cloud platform. It's actually getting your customer to adopt it, right? To change their business process to fit it because they're choosing to use a cloud platform which isn't fully customizable. I don't know if I'm saying this right. So say you want to build your own CRM. Yeah, you can just build, pick a stack and hire a bunch of developers and build your own CRM. Totally possible. You're going to overpay and it's probably not going to have close to the functionality that Salesforce has, but you can make it specifically custom to your organization, right? Things are called the things that your organization calls them. Maybe you call households groups of people. I don't know. You can make that the name of the thing and your organization doesn't have to change. But you are now inheriting a very large piece of tech debt, in my opinion. So the reason that you use a Salesforce and the reason that it works well is that you train businesses to adopt the way that Salesforce also does their work. So it's a two-way street, really, when you think about customization or using a cloud platform. On one hand, the customer is adopting a way of doing business, aka the Salesforce way, using the words like account, contact, person accounts, households, parties, whatever, opportunity. I think a lot of nonprofits hate that word opportunity, right? The first thing you go in is you like change opportunity to gift or something. Yeah, you can do a little bit of that, but as we know, it doesn't change it everywhere, right? It changes it 95% of the places. So part of it is adopting Salesforce, but then Salesforce is highly customizable in what I consider the right parts. The parts of keeping your customers in really defined business processes and trails so that they don't make mistakes, that their data is clean, that they're able to process transactions correctly without a ton of training. So to me, those are the values of using a cloud platform.
Bhanu, kind of spinning off of on what you just said, I actually worked with a nonprofit, and we actually had to go change opportunities all over the place, and it was a nightmare because they couldn't understand the term, right, that we're using, so we have to get it to use their terms in terms of all the objects and all the labels and everything. It was just a nightmare going through there. Spent like a week.
Well,
just doing
and
that.
then you think about what's the value, right? I mean, how many people were at that nonprofit?
Right. The nonprofit was relatively small.
Like under 10. How many users were you implementing?
Well, we implemented it, but then there was no it was never adopted because they were like teetering between like they're going to use it or not. So basically we did all that work for nothing because we found out afterwards, after that we're done, it's like, oh no, we're going to use something, we're going to have somebody else do it and we're not going to use it, but we did everything for them,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. See, I feel like that's a good example of doing the wrong things for the customer, right? It's like the things that really help adoption isn't, oh, I need to now think of it as case or opportunity. It's did I get features like when I close the opportunity, it automatically sent an email to the donor, so now I don't have to do that. Or when I get a commitment, I have it integrated so that it generates the LOI automatically in DocuSign and it emails it and gets the signature, which then automatically changes the opportunity status so I don't have to deal with that. Those are the features that gets people to adopt Salesforce because it's helping their everyday job. The other thing is designing Salesforce so it's impossible for them to finish their job unless they use Salesforce. To me, that's the best feature to look for. If you can find those features and requirements when working with customers, you will get adoption because they can't do their work without using Salesforce. So it's like finding those opportunities when you're working with customers to build functionality inside of Salesforce or leverage existing so that it delights it like delights them, right? We talk about making a lovable product. The reason it's lovable is because as I'm working in my day-to-day, it just did something for me that I didn't have to do. And so I'm feeling delighted about it. I don't know if you guys experienced that. I've been feeling that a lot with like, there's this, everyone talks about GPT these days. There's a coding GPT thing called Copilot, and it delights me. Every couple, maybe a few times an hour, I'm coding and it goes boop, and it just like recommends the thing that I was thinking about. And I'm like, oh my God, so those are the things we want to offer our customers, right? We want to build these features, but it's our job to find it. They don't know how to ask for it, unfortunately. I mean, most don't. So it's our job to say, we have to dig in there and say, okay, well, what if we take that thing that you do and we automate it? Then you don't have to do this anymore. And underlying that is you can't do it anymore. So you have to use the system, right? That to me is the best, kind of way to get adoption.
Bhanu,
Anyway, yeah.
I've also seen a little bit of the flip side of that is that they're so married to their process that they ask us to customize Salesforce to fit the process
Yeah.
that they are married to,
Yeah.
instead of adopting a new business process that would be a lot more efficient.
Right.
And
That's
because
hard.
Salesforce is so customizable, a lot of partners do that, a lot of
Yeah.
ISPs do that. And
Yeah.
so then you've got a lot of this tech debt, because now it's, instead of using a more efficient business process and teaching them that,
Mm-hmm.
mirroring what they were used to doing and now doing that in Salesforce.
Right. It's funny, right? We write up a lot of these, especially when the projects get bigger, we call it like digital transformation, right? That's like what we call the project. And I often tell our team, especially when we're doing those, the transformation isn't that they have a new system. The transformation is we've re-architected their business process so they do things completely differently and more efficiently. That's the transformation. Transformation isn't just, I call it like chairs on the Titanic, right? It's like we just moved, the ship is still sinking, but we just gave you a new system. That doesn't help. So exactly to your point, it's very hard to do that work because it takes, in my opinion, or my experience, both executive support, pushing down on management to say, no, do it differently, change what you do. It's okay. They also need permission. A lot of times managers don't feel like they have the permission to innovate and ask. I think that's a very unique Hawaii thing that I find. People don't ask for what they want. So there's a lot of pulling, you got to really work with folks and really get in there. That's probably the thing that I've recognized a lot about Hawaii is that there's a lot of the messaging I get is, oh no, that's okay, it's fine. And so when I hear that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's dig into it, right? Let's find out what's underneath that. It's just fine, because that's an opportunity. Yeah, that's an opportunity for change, right? That that behind there, they're like, I see it could be better, but my manager doesn't let me innovate, so I'm not going to say it, or something like that, right? The reasons are infinite, but to your point, yes, you don't want to just re-implement their existing business process because, I don't know. I mean, it's easier to do it that way most of the time, but you're not giving them the real value of Salesforce.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at time.
Okay.
We kind of meandered our way through all of that. I appreciate you guys spending a beautiful morning. I don't know, for people in Hawaii, like, it's a gorgeous day. So I
Yeah.
hope you get out there and enjoy it. Thank you for spending your morning hour with us. I appreciate it.
There was a real, maybe you can just touch this on this quickly, but Mike had asked if there was going to be a future support for NPSP, or can we expect a slowdown in the resources they're putting into NPSP?
Yeah. Well, as we saw on LinkedIn, the whole team got fired. So I don't know who's left to support NPSP. I say that kind of jokingly. They have said there's, they being Salesforce said they will be supporting NPSP. It's not going away. And all the developers that we know were there are no longer there. So I think it's to be seen. There are no features or normally they would release with the same Salesforce release cycle, but someone, I don't know where I read this, it was like in the last day, someone made a comment that said that the summer or maybe the next release has 0 NPSP features. So it's not being, it doesn't appear to be, we're not adding new functionality. If anything, they're just maintaining it at this point.
Well, that's definitely an indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, writing's on the wall, right? We're gonna move.
It's gonna be a wild ride.
It is. It's a bummer for the customers. I mean, it's a bummer and an opportunity, right? For the existing customers, it's another bummer. As Dodi was saying, this is the 3rd time that it's happened to some of these old orgs. So, some of us had that like rolling eyes of not again. But the reality is, it's a real, I think it's a big improvement. I think it gets us on the core product. I'm questionable about Omni Studio. I have a question mark on it. I'm excited for it, but I feel like it, I don't know. I want to let's try to get Mark Baseman to come talk to us about Omni Studio,
Okay.
because he's the trainer of Omni Studio. So he would be able to explain it to us, and then maybe we can have him speak off script a little bit and actually tell us how it works versus the Salesforce script.
Can I drop your name when I send him a LinkedIn? Hey, would you like to speak at our user?
I'll reach out to him.
Oh, you will. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I'll ask him.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else in closing? You're
No,
welcome, Shani.
thank you so
Thanks for
much.
being here.
This is this is super helpful, and I really enjoyed seeing the things that are similar and different with the new nonprofit cloud. So we'll see
Yeah.
how this thing evolves, but
Yeah.
the train, I think, has already left the station, so we need to jump on
It is. It is going.
Again, and man, this was like a crash course in everything. So,
Well, yeah, not even a course. I wouldn't even consider this a crash course in anything. We
Or
just
just
talked
like
about like
an
high level
overview.
stuff.
yeah. So I was like, it's good to just kind of understand where the environment is now and where it's going. But yeah, I think I have a lot more to learn.
Yeah, and
I'll do.
keep on showing up. We're here to support you, Victor. So we'll definitely figure out a way to get things going. Oh, I didn't talk about our program. Go visit purplemaya.org and go look for our program, because we train admins, and we have an apprentice program that if we get another round of funding, we're waiting for another round of funding. So, but if we do get another 3 years, it's something you might want to consider joining. Kimmy's in the program, Shani's in the program, Young's former, Ruby's former.
I found you guys
So,
a few months back, and I really wanted to join, but since it said for Native Hawaiians, I didn't know if I qualified. But then I met Yumi Nakasone, and she was also in the program, and she told me great things about it as well. So I will definitely check it out. Thank you.
We are inclusive. We're inclusive. So come check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All
Great.
right.
Bhanu, can you send me the slides so I can
Yeah,
post them on our
I
link?
will.
Okay,
I
cool.
will send it to you right now.
Awesome.
Great.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Long weekend. Have a great long weekend. Woohoo.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.